Queen of Holes by C.S.R. No matter what age you are, don't forget to check under your bed for monsters. You might make a new friend, or need to run away. Let's hope it's the first one.
Chapter 1. The Cold-Hearted Prince. I set out to find the heart of the one known as Marla on my own, since it became apparent to me that this seemingly easy task was too difficult for the servants to do. Queen Fervus was growing impatient, and she is impossible to deal with when upset. Of course, her agitation was making me rather agitated as well, so I knew that something would have to be done about this plight, so why not do it myself? Punishing those who came back unsuccessful at completing their duty had become fairly cumbersome to me. And besides, I was curious to meet this Marla myself. She held much about her that most did not know. So much power resided in this young girl. What type of person could she be? What kind of person would someone born from greatness, forced into a pitiful land such as Homines, act like? Unlike my servants, tracking her down was rather easy. She had quite the reputation amongst the people of Ultradesma, and wasn't exactly in hiding. From what I gathered, this girl would usually visit Argentum or Aurum City, but had a tendency to appear in other cities for short amount of times. She was opening up all of these different portals that seemed to have been closed for quite a while. I had learned her typical schedule, who her companions were, the ones she kept especially close, and why she was where she was. She had made relations with two charmers of the Charisime family. Only one, being the eldest brother named Jarvis, I actually had known prior to my search. On top of this, she had close comrades ranging from creepers, devourers, burners, tempters, adapters, shapers, and even granters. The rate at which I gathered all this information just proved that the servants given this task really were imbeciles who couldn't perform such a simple task, and that I should deal with them further after getting the heart for Queen Fervus. I shall think of a proper punishment on the way back to the castle. I had located the one known as Marla early in fall. She was wandering around in Aurum City all by herself. Identifying her was rather easy since her photo had been one seen throughout Ultradesma about 10 years ago when she was still a child. It was strange to stare at her, and she flowed along, moving in between the light of the sun and the darkness of shadows casted from the buildings around us. Something about the air around her was fairly angelic, even godlike. The dress she wore was an ivory color, relatively close to her porcelain skin. She wore fingerless gloves just barely passing her elbows. Her shoes were very close to the color of her gloves. Then there were what I presumed to be stockings, as her skirt covered where they would have ended, full of ivory and white stripes in a horizontal pattern. It seemed that the only thing that was not a similar color to ivory or white on her, since her hair was a strange pale blonde, were the girl's beady hazel eyes. The steps she took were relatively large, and her movements appeared to almost be as though she were dancing. I'm sure I heard her hum quietly to herself as she bounced about to her own tune. She suddenly halted in her tracks and pulled out a device from the right pocket in her skirt. I saw this as my chance, and decided to move in on her. I swiftly found my way behind her, ready to snatch the still beating heart from her chest. But something stopped me as I got a glimpse of what was inside her. It was rather strange, but her heart seemed empty and artificial. I stared deeper in, seeing if maybe I was wrong. But her heart was undoubtedly not what I was searching for. Without warning, I found the back of her left wrist slam into my face. Something like that had never happened to me before, but I guess I was so concentrated on her heart, or lack of, that my reflexes had become numb to the world around it. I made eye contact with the girl, in a way that warned her that I was willing to fight back, and I would not take this treatment lightly. But her widened eyes spoke something else. They weren't trying to challenge me to fight, nor were they showing fear. I was sure that I saw pity in them. But whom the pity was for, I wasn't sure.
Oh, my three, I'm so sorry.
The girl cried out after a lengthy time of silence and staring intently at me, which I was sure her observing me in either fear of my appearance or awe of my stature, neither of which bothered me. I was taken aback by these words. She was apologizing to me, and right as I was ready to rip the heart straight from her chest, she had hit me in defense, had she not? But then again, I had to remind myself that my presence wasn't even known to her in the first place. Or at least, it shouldn't have been.
I had just been checking a message on my phone that had been sent from Darlene, trying to tell me that she was already in the building right above me. But then, I thought I heard this voice in the back of my mind, warning me to turn around, almost saying that danger was right behind me. The voice scared me as it screamed. I raised my arm and flung it about in frustration and fear, trying to rid myself of this odd phenomenon. The voice had agitated me so much, making me feel so distressed that I wasn't thinking, nor was I quite aware of my surroundings. Eventually, my arm had flung right into the face of a man standing behind me. He seemed to remain rather calm, but his gleaming hollow gold eyes did speak of some alarm. Staring at his face was rather entrancing, almost very charming. The cornea of his eyes were busy with many layers of circles surrounding its irises, almost like a tool of hypnosis, while his irises were the opposite and quite empty of everything but color. His eyes didn't even have pupils, just a blank slate that spoke of an empty heart and soul. I felt that was the point of them, to cause fear, but I found them rather sad. His pink eyebrows furrowed in irritation, which was understandable since I had just hit him. Speaking of eyebrows, which brought my attention to next, one of them had been split in two by some angry wound. I couldn't quite tell what was the cause of the scar, but it seemed almost like he had clawed at it. I browsed at the rest of his forehead and noticed seemingly natural dents of either side of his head, but in between these were wires that obviously had been forced into his scalp, replacing where hair should have been. My eyes made their way down and center of his face to his nose. His nostrils were longer and thinner than a normal human, but I was more focused on the marks that covered his face. They remind me of a tribal hunter's makeup. It was a darker purple than that of his silver purple skin, but I'm sure that all these marks were natural and not artificial. I then took notice of his round, large ears that were pierced with gauge earrings. I finally started to look at his clothes, which seemed to be extravagant robes and garments of dark and muted colors, but had a cool color palette to them. He wore a very long cape that hung past his feet in the back. His top was concealed by armor that almost resembled a human rib cage. There was a wrap around his waist that hung over his long robe. I then snatched myself back in reality as I stopped gawking at him like an idiot and blurted out an apology. I'm so sorry. I really didn't mean to smack you. I wasn't aware you were there. I bowed my head penitently, feeling as though I kept making a fool of myself in front of complete strangers. I looked back into his cold gaze and saw what seemed to be a tint of confusion. Reading his emotions was rather hard since he had the subtlest facial reactions.
Marla,
I heard Darlene scream out my name in fear.
get away from that man.
I looked up at the balcony at which she stood. She was gripping the metal fencing so tight, I was sure she would bend it out of place. I turned my glance at the man whose body slightly tensed, almost as though he was preparing for something. In the corner of my eye, I saw Darlene jump down from the balcony and dash to my side, pulling me behind her. The man took a moment, but then released the tension from his body as he heaved out a silent sigh.
It would seem I have no use to be here anyway.
He spoke with a very formal and empty tone. He made eye contact with me once again.
The one known as Marla, where is your heart?
I stuttered as I tried to answer. Wait, what? I was confused. In my chest? The man gave a slight grunted sigh.
Is that a question or a statement?
I'm not sure.
If it is a question, then the answer is that it isn't in your chest. No games. Where is your heart?
I don't know what you're talking about. My heart is beating in my chest right now. Why do you want to know anyway? The man turned away from us in a domineering manner.
It is becoming apparent to me that you are completely clueless. How disappointing. I expected better. It's either that, or you wear an innocent and naive guise.
He started to walk away from us.
I will be back, goddess.
I stared at Darlene, who seemed to be fighting the urge to chase after him. Did he just call me goddess?
Doesn't matter.
My friend barked.
Let's get you inside now. This has to be some sort of serious and grave issue if that thing is here for your heart. We need to address everyone else.